Welcome to Bury Talent, the show for young professionals that tears down false beliefs about faith and work so you can unbury your God-given talent right where you are. I'm Ken Freire, and here with my co-host today, Patrick Lowndes, and we're talking about second part of getting promoted, how companies analyze performance. Patrick, why is it important? Analyzing what they do.
Yeah. Well, if you don't know the scorecard and how you're being measured, then you're kind of flying blind. And there's lots of opinions out there about how, what you should do to position yourself to get this raise or to get this promotion. And we'll talk about money and kind of the specifics. I'll say the finer points of what happens in that conversation and kind of the decisions that get made. But before we approach that, we have to think about like, what are they doing behind the scenes? Because every company, especially if you get to any amount of size, there is a process. There's a way that you either fit into the process favorably or you're not fitting into the process favorably. And you need to understand what that is.
Yeah. And that's where when we get understanding, we'll get clarity. So let's talk about this. How do we want to frame this for everybody? There's a lot of meat today that we want them to walk away with.
Yeah. Well, it's really you want to think about every company has a budget that they're working with. And so what you're thinking about here is this is really a capital allocation conversation, right? They have a certain budget they're working with to deal with giving out raises, considering adjustments in people's promotion. And so leading up to this point, you've already been evaluated probably the company is doing their job well more than just once a year. If it's a startup, maybe they're rookie at this and it is literally once a year. But a lot of big companies do like a mid-year review. Some of them even do like a quarterly check-in. Like there's all sorts of different rhythms that are out there. But what we want to figure out is laying out four of some of the common ways that companies are doing this, and then even a fifth one that will be a helpful tip for you to like discern and figure out how is your specific company doing that. So without further ado, let's jump into the first one with the 9-box grid. You want to take this one?
Yeah. So this is the foundational map, or sometimes the team base called current performance versus future potential. A lot of people have used this when it comes to like the placement model. And if we had a picture up, you would see that you got like on the X axis, you got potential. And then on the Y axis, you got performance. And I just lost everybody when I said X and Y axis.
Well, actually, it's the x-axis on the bottom is performance, and potential is on the left side, and the y-axis going up. See, Ken, we should have labeled them.
We should have labeled up. I should have passed algebra at some point. Right. But here's what this is doing, the 9-box grid, right? The goal is that if you can show you can handle complexity, right, you move higher in your potential. This has been popular in most Fortune 500 companies. Over 70% of large enterprises use this. In 2026, 82% of HR leaders report that AI literacy and strategic discernment are now the primary filters for potential in this access. So as
Wow.
you think about how you're trying to grow your potential, understand that you want to know strategic discernment and right? AI literacy. That's what
Yep.
they're measuring you for. So if you're looking at your job and saying, how can I get allocated more resources or promotion? These are the things you want to start kind of being mindful of.
Yep. And you can look up again 9-box talent grid or 9-box, performance assessment. You'll see that what those 9 boxes are. But the bottom left is like risk. It's not very good. Like low risk, low performance, low potential, not the place where you want to be. You might be pretty solid on your performance, right? Which is like it actually says solid performer on some of these models, like high in performance. But if you are low potential, it might mean that you are staying within the lines of your role. It might mean that you are doing the things like you are box checking really efficiently, you're reliable as a performer, but you're not necessarily looking up at what the business could need. You're not anticipating as many needs. So one of the ways to shift up in potential is like what Ken's talking about, this strategic looking up and outside of the role or the tasks right in front of you and thinking downstream, downline. How are my actions in this product or in this project? How are those actions affecting teams around me? That's the difference between someone who's like just good at their job and someone who's that has higher performance potential. Cool. That's number one, 9 box. Number two is the T-shaped leader versus the pie-shaped leader. And if you've talked with me before, I've probably mentioned, we all get really good these days. We over specialize and we grow the long part of that T, which is like one domain that you're really good at. Like, I'm really good at software engineering, or I'm really good at finance, right? But the tops of those T's are basically the size, the breadth of what that leader is capable of. And what we're seeing is that more companies are interested in this, what they're calling more of a pie shaped pie. When I first heard that, I was like, ooh, I'm getting hungry. Pie. It's not that kind of pie. It's like the 3.14 number pie. And if you've seen that number for it, the numerical, image of it, it actually is like, it looks like a table. You got the two legs and then the one on top that's connecting them. So what is pie shaped? It might be someone who's good at like software engineering is one leg of the pie. And it could be like product strategy. And how does that strategy go to market? Like, that's a really powerful second skill set. And then maybe on the top is like, how is, for example, how is my AI strategy going to inform how I build the product and how I bring it to market? Now I got three really integrated kind of skill sets. More and more companies are moving away from just, oh, you're just this role and you got a little bit on the sides. They're looking for multi-dimensional people. And so your company might be doing that. Agile software startups are doing this. Some big companies like IBM are also leaning into this. And there's also a stat here, Ken, I'll share, and then I'll shut up and let you react to it. But the stat is that so multidisciplinary adaptability is the number one predictor of promotion. There's actually 34, if you just look at the numbers here, there's companies that have found pie-shaped employees. They reduce departmental silo friction by 34% compared to specialists. So like, if you think about that, it's someone who's able to expand out their skill set and reduce silos across teams. That person is making the operation more smooth.
Yeah. And there's two things that I just want to quickly reference here. Number one, we here at Frontier Operators love talking about growing operators. And when we talk about operators, we're talking about cross-functional capabilities. So we would probably lend more to this T-shape versus pie-shape kind of methodology, because we're looking at people and saying, how do you develop yourself in such a strong way that you can help other departments think clearly?
That's right. That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
So T-shape, pie shape, but the idea here is still the same, is multidimensional adaptability is going to be your strongest key to adding value. Yeah.
Yeah. So making sure that you are aware of, again, what your company uses so that you can start speaking within that language of how and what they expect from you when it comes to being promoted, which leads to the third one. This is the A player talent density model. And what this model it does is that it's looking at how well are you a top performer. And there's tends to be a test, a keeper test that people use. And it goes something like this. If a manager asks, if this person wanted to leave for a competitor tomorrow, would I fight to keep them? I want you to think about that really well, because
That's a good question.
are you worth fighting for?
Mm.
And so, like, oh, I don't want to be fought for. Like, but sometimes you got to. Like, I ask myself that every single morning when I wake up. Am I worth fighting for today? Like, am I keeping my position? Am I doing everything that I need to be doing? Am I being faithful and going above and beyond? And you got to ask the same question, because if your manager comes down to it and be like, you know what? They're like a B player, a C player. They're going to quickly kind of bump you off.
Mm-hmm.
A great company, well, they're great in their own right. That they do is Netflix. Netflix popularized this type of model. They're always asking this question for their people. Stanford in 2025, the Stanford Business Study says this. They found that a single A player in a tech-driven role produces 400% more value than an average performer, making a 20% raise a massive bargain for the employer. So I want you to think about this, that if you can bring that much value to your job, it just changes the game. And this is why in last week's episode we were talking about keeping the numbers, making sure you're able to show the proof of value that you have, because if you're a top performer, you can drastically change it. For them to just give you a 20% raise is nothing compared to losing you, right? Then they have to spend all the money for talent, for another talent acquisition, and they may end up having to hire two people to replace you if you're a top performer. So just recognize the massive ability that you have if one, you're an A player, and two, if your company uses this type of model, they're going to be looking constantly for, are you the talent?
That's right. And that brings us to our fourth model that we're going to talk about today, which is the lattice versus the ladder model. So again, we talked about Gartner last time, and they did some research around this somewhat recently and found out that, again, most people, like 60% of Gen Z in particular, they'll find their air quotes promotion, right? Not by just going straight up, but they'll find it through a lateral shift. And you might say, why is this happening more in lateral shifts? Well, I think when you think about the picture, just picture what a lattice looks like, right? It's just like a bunch of ladders all together, right? And so it's not that, going up is bad. What it's saying here is that if you have optionality, which this builds really nicely on the previous couple episodes we just released, but if you're building optionality and you're getting to know other teams and how well you can add value within teams, even around you, then you might actually have a lateral move going sideways that sometimes can actually put you in a different pay bracket. Sometimes they can put you in a team that has a lot more momentum and growth behind it. For example, so Gartner spearheaded this model, and then some big complex organizations like Deloitte, one of the big four consulting firms, Cisco, they use this internal talent marketplace to move people around. I also know here locally in the Seattle area, in Microsoft, searching and shopping for jobs internally is a thing, like just looking around at different teams. And so going back to Ken's point, like if you're not passing the keeper test, like you're not, you might need to get to some other team where you can pass that test and add a ton of value. And maybe you're in a job right now that's not there, that's not right there knocking it out of the park. So you need to think about, what is the lattice of options around me? And Ken, as we were preparing the notes for this, you're like, yeah, but what if you're in a small company, you don't have all those different jobs, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Like for a startup, your next lattice type opportunity might be at another startup in the space. Like you might have to look, maybe there really is only one small engineering team that you're working on, and you need to go look at other more, I'll say, worthy rivals in the space to go work for, because now you have some knowledge and there's some non-competes you have to consider. But you might have to consider another company to go make that lateral adjustment. But the lattice model is very interesting because there's not just one path to developing your career. Obviously, there's lots. And so open your eyes up. That's where the networking piece can really come into play. So there's number 4.
Which brings us to our last one, and this is the custom scorecard. What ends up happening is these are the big four that we just talked about. But if you're using an HR company or the HR teams in the inside, or you're a smaller company, whatever the thing may be, they might choose a hybrid model, and they're cherry picking from each one. Like they might say, hey, we're really all about A players, but they also have a ladder type philosophy, or they use the 9-box and they're working with the keeper test. Most organizations use a hybrid model. So they pick from different things. Even as we're talking about each one, you might have thought, oh yeah, my company does this one and this one and this one. That's okay. That's the reality of where we're at. So some companies will use a mix. They will evaluate their performance based on their own measuring stick. The truth is, it may not even be written down. And it may not seem fair right at the moment, but this is why we're talking about this, so that you can be cognizant of it and be like, oh, I'm starting to see glimpses of it. And if you see glimpses of it, then you can, if you know what they're measuring you by, you can start producing results for that.
That's right. That's right. And Ken, can you like Help us shift a little bit because again, I think we like to talk about like there's lots of things outside of our control, but unburied talent here, like we like to also talk about what is our responsibility as believers. Can you just tee that up for us how our faith informs this conversation?
Yeah. So the big thing is that we're not here about just self advancement. We're like, all right, let's just make our name for ourselves. We're here about faithfully stewarding what God has given us. And if you look at the parable of the talents, right? Some people were given 1 talent, some people were two, and another person 5 talents. And our job now is to say, how do we take whatever we've been given ourselves and steward it well, double our resources, use it as best as possible, and being diligent at the same time, right? Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for man. So you take both of those concepts of working diligently and then be a good steward of your resources and say, whatever job I'm in, how do I just crush it? And again, we talk about numbers a lot sometimes, but numbers are also helpful for you. So you know what success looks like. Like you've succeeded in being a wise steward in what God has given you.
Yeah, it's good. And so when you're looking at the system, it's not about, you're not asking your boss about how it all works to come across like, hey, I want to game the system. Like I want to just, max this sucker out, right? Because they'll sniff that out. Like I've been in that role where someone's like, okay, Patrick, like, like I know I'm newer here, but like I want to know how it works and I want to get that. If you're leading them with like, I want to get that promotion, I want to blah, 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 and you haven't really added much value to the company, you got to be careful how you kind of broach that conversation. Well, the way that we like to bring up this conversation, within Frontier operators is, yeah, I do want to know how people develop their careers at this company, but I also want to figure out what would like what would be an obvious add to your team. Like if you're looking at the entire team, you're saying, man, this person is making such an outsized contribution in their role that I want to help this person stay on my team, goes back to the keeper tool, and I want to see them grow, right? And that posture, that's like a missional posture of service. It's like super service, right? Ken, like Jesus is like, lay your life down for your friend. That means like lay your like ambitions down to some degree so that you can serve really well with excellence, with competence, with reliability. And if as you're doing that, and as a believer, we know our work is like our worship to God. Your boss is also going to see that you're not in it just to win it for you, but you're in it for the team's win. And when you demonstrate that as a Christian, they'll notice. They'll be like, "Man, this guy just he really does like want to see the company win. He wants to see the customer win." And when you're others focused like that, that sets the stage for, okay, Ken's not just asking me about this because he's trying to just level up and get that next, pay bump. There's more to it. And yes, you should ask, by the way, how are those decisions made? Just so I know all the factors, right? But it's best to ask that when you're early in the job, so you have plenty of time to build up that monthly value, scorecard that we were talking about in the last episode.
Yeah,
So, so yeah, Ken, that's a way to bring it home in terms of having the posture of like, I want to add value.
absolutely. And for those of you who are thinking, how can I add value today? Just start looking around. And if anything, just ask your boss. Ask your boss that one question, right? What's a problem that's been keeping you up at night that I can go solve? And you'd be surprised what they say and go solve it. Go make it happen. Start looking at these frameworks and start saying to yourself, hey, I'm going to go figure out a way to crush it for my company and for my team.
Yep.
With
Yep.
that, we will leave you. I want to encourage you to keep fighting the good fight and making sure that you understand how this works. And then next week, we will start talking about.
We're going to dive into the nuts and bolts of the actual conversation. Maybe you thought this was today, so maybe we gave it a little bit too much of a hype. We're getting into the annual performance review, talking about comp, talking about salary bumps, pay adjustments, role adjustments. So stay with us for the next episode and we'll dive in deep. Thanks so much.